Hi, I'm Seamless, and really quickly, I want to talk about how I go about making sample packs inside FL Studio. And you're pretty much looking at it right here. If you've got your sound, which is the easy part of making a sample pack, then your next step is that you have to break it up into individual files, name them appropriately, and then have it all be in a folder and that kind of stuff. Which you can either do individually, or there's ways of like screwing around with the mixer to do batch rendering like that and that kind of thing, which kind of works, but that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to use the markers to make everything work. So the way this happens is that the way that I work it is that I will start wherever I start on whatever note I'm starting on, and then every next sample is going to be a note that proceeds chromatically. Every time I say that word, I want to say chronologically, chromatically. And the value of this is that I don't have to check what note it is when I write what note it is in the marker. Note that I'm calling them E1 and F1 and whatever, and this is E1 and F1, but even if this was E2 and F2, I would still call it E1 and F1 because they are the first ones. In this case, this is chronologically. It's not necessarily about what octave they're in, but literally just how many of the samples are in that note. It's key. For me, you might care enough to do that kind of thing, but the whole point is whatever you want to name them individually, you name them in these markers. To put down markers, you can either right-click up here and just say add marker, or you can say Control-T, which will put a marker there automatically and name it auto, and then you can come in here and rename it and call it whatever you want. Or you can say Alt-T, which will ask you what you want to call it, and then place it specifically the farthest line over to the right, I think. Maybe the farthest main line, because it didn't go after that guy, but it doesn't go where you want to go, like where you're putting it, like Control-T does, which it really should, but it doesn't. Anyway, that's how these markers get here. And the whole point of having the markers is that we're going to render this as a file, which I totally already did. And then once you have it rendered, you're going to open it up inside Edison. When you're opening it up inside Edison, derp. Actually, you know something? We're going to do this again. Yeah. As you can see, I totally already did this, but we're going to do it again because I want to make sure that we are not lost on this. Yeah, right here. Another big old sample. I rendered out at 32-bit, which at this point is just because it's gonna have to get rendered again, but everything, so it might as well be the biggest of everything, vis-a-vis uncompressed wave filage. As well, if whatever processing you're doing, like if you're worrying about like your samples peaking at 0 dB and that kind of thing, then you don't have to if you make a 32-bit floating point, because then they don't. Loading sample. Which, it's a little bit misleading for me to say what I just said, but because they do clip and they do go above 0 dB, but they don't clip in the sense that they are not destroyed as a result of doing that. You can still turn them down and your information will still be there. It's handy. Depending, of course, on if whoever's DAW or sample or thing you're using actually lets them use 32-bit floating point samples, which not everything does. For example, I'm not 100% sure that the hardware sampler I have could use 32-bit floating point wave files. So you could elect to render them in 16-bit as well if you're doing that kind of thing. And as well, if you got your stuff below 0 dB, then there is not really a point in having a 30-bit floating point. But I generally keep them there just because it's the easiest solution, and also no one's complained about it yet, and is the safest bet, I think, personally. But once you've got it in here and you see how the markers are all named up there, they have all the names up there, and you just render them like that. And you do that by going to File, Export Regions, for common use. For sampler use is when you want your thing to loop, which could either be if you're making like a direct wave tone or whatever, which you can just do in direct wave now. You don't even need to do this. But since there's silence at the end of my sample and I don't have to worry about what the beginning and ends are doing, I'm just going to go for common use and render it. Now, the cool thing is that when you render it and you go check it out, it renders it with whatever name of the sample, in addition, the name of the region. And it's already nice and like organized looking and good stuff. So like you could name this the note like I did. You could name it something else, like whatever you named the region is going to be that thing. Note also that the regions were different lengths and time. The regions themselves are determined by just where the regions are. So despite these guys being a uniform length, these guys starts and stopped here, which meant that these samples were longer or shorter. You didn't have to care. You didn't have to set it up to be anything at any point. It just is that. Which is great. So yeah, this is more or less my process, which is way simpler than what I did back when I actually more earnestly made sample packs. So also the smart thing to do would be to do something like make a template of a project that like on every like large distances like this, for example, like every one of these was one of these notes already, and just have like Just have a bunch of them. Like what I did when I did the how to base, the previous how to base, what I did was I had only so much of them, but then I had multiple passes of this amount. So it was like these notes, it was like 40 odd notes, a repeat of a run up and down some octaves, and then the different forms of modulation. And then I rendered that out like 6 times. So I would name the sample, like, actually, we can just go look at the sample. We can go look at what it ended up looking like. Actually, it's in here, isn't it? This whole time. Bam, how to base 196. So we have 196A and then 196B, and like then they're all named the way they are. And like this helps us, like, in this case, this is about passes of multiple passes of manual automation. So like here's A1, here's B1, here's CA1, DA1, and so on. Like that wasn't A1 at that time, but like that's, so we get different amounts. Like that's how the nomenclature worked out, and it's because of the batch rendering. And I did not have to try hard. Like I'm just explaining to you what's happening. You're probably like you're already bored about like how I've already got to the point. But like it should be stressed that this is apparently not a regular amount of convenience when you're doing this sort of thing. There are programs out there that are a lot better at there's programs specifically about batch rendering WAV files into other kinds of WAV files and whatever. So if you need like transform something from one file type to another, then you'd want to do that externally. But when it comes to naming files, especially naming things with note values, because you can, Windows has automatic naming for numbers of every kind, dates even, but nothing has any kind of consideration for musical nomenclature, which means that trying to devise like automatic naming for something like a sample pack is entirely on your own. You're on your own about doing that. Fortunately, especially given that we're still in the same program that we used to make the damn thing, being able to have this work out like this well is pretty convenient. Anyway, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.